I recently watched an animator friend of mine stand in front of a replica of the Chujigiga, which is a 12th century Japanese picture scroll.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and this is a guy who lives for frame rates for sub-pixel precision, you know.
Yeah.
But he spent nearly 20 minutes just slowly pacing alongside this glass case.
Just taking it in.
His eyes were darting back and forth across these ink-brushed rabbits and frogs. And he wasn't just looking at a painting, he was physically playing it.
Mm-hmm.
As he moved his body from right to left, the wrestling animals, they actually seemed to leap and tumble. He turned to me and he was genuinely unsettled, and he said, "This thing is 800 years old, but it's more alive than the 4K render I finished this morning."
That is an incredible moment of realization.
It really was. For years, we've been taught that animation is a technical box, right? It's a video file played at a fixed speed on a flat screen. We see a fluid sequence and we call it life.
Right.
But as he stood there, he realized the paper wasn't the screen. His own movement was the playback engine.
He was the projector.
He was the projector. The animation wasn't in the ink. It was happening in the physical space between his eyes and the wall. It was this interactive performance of time that needed his body to even function.
I love that.
And then the conversation shifted. He pulls out his phone, shows me this generative AI clip he'd been worried about. A perfectly smooth, hyper-realistic loop of a forest.
The kind of thing we're seeing everywhere now.
Everywhere. And it was technically flawless. But standing there in that quiet gallery, that digital perfection felt, I don't know, strangely hollow, suffocating almost.
Empty.
Empty. He's terrified that AI is going to replace him because it can generate motion faster than any human. But staring at that ancient scroll, this weird realization started to settle in for both of us. Maybe the problem isn't the AI.
Maybe the problem is the box.
Maybe the problem is that we've spent the last century trapped inside a glowing rectangle, forgetting that the most powerful form of animation doesn't need a screen at all. So what if the future for the animator isn't about competing with a machine to fill a two-dimensional grid of pixels, but about breaking out of the screen entirely to reclaim a type of time that AI can't touch?
That story just perfectly captures the central paradox we're going to get into today. You have this ancient artifact, built without any electricity and no complex mechanics.
Just ink and paper.
It's just ink and paper, and it's generating a more resonant sense of life than this smooth, algorithmically perfect video of the 21st century.
Exactly.
So the mission of this deep dive is to explore exactly that pivot. We're going to chart a path for animators to transition from that traditional 2D video production out of the screen and toward immersive spatial design, physical installations. And we're going to do it by leveraging these really unexpected insights, specifically from ancient East Asian scrolls, to counter that threat of generative AI standardization.
We're looking for what you call the blue ocean of embodied time.
That's it. The space that lies fundamentally outside that glowing rectangle.
Okay, so let's unpack this crisis right at the start. Because for the past 100 years, it feels like we've inadvertently defined animation in a way that is now, tailor-made for AI to just come in and destroy.
We really have.
We've confined it to the video format.
And that confinement you mentioned, that's really the key here.
It's everything.
Our contemporary definition of animation is just so narrow. It focuses almost exclusively on, like you said, a visual expression played back at a fixed frame rate on a 2D monitor.
It feels like an undeniable truth.
It does. But it's not an artistic truth. It's a technological one. This definition, this idea that movement equals flawless, automatic, sequential playback, is just a narrow interpretation we formed retrospectively.
Right.
It grew up alongside the industrial development of video technology.
So we let the limits of cinema and television define the entire art form.
We did. We allowed the format constraints to dictate what the art could be.
And when you define creativity in terms of flawless output within a fixed two-dimensional grid, you've basically handed the keys to the kingdom over to AI.
You've handed them right over. AI is perfectly optimized for this exact task. It treats the 2D video format as a massive statistical problem.
It's just math to the machine.
It's just math. It trains on trillions of existing frames, and it derives these statistically optimal solutions for generating the next frame in a sequence. It can produce high-quality photorealistic video animation faster, cheaper, and with a mechanical precision that, no human drawing or modeling team can possibly match.
Not even close.
For a machine, generating a smooth 4K animated loop is just the flawless execution of a calculation. There's no struggle. There's no art, really. It's just an answer.
And that leads directly to what our sources call the standardization trap. If I'm a young animator today, I'm thinking, okay, I have to be faster, I have to be smoother, I have to be cheaper than the animator sitting next to me.
Of course. That's the logical conclusion.
But if everyone is competing on those technical metrics, they're not just competing with each other, they're all competing with the AI.
Which is infinitely faster, infinitely smoother, and infinitely cheaper.
It's an unwinnable competition.
It is literally unwinnable on those terms. The proliferation of these tools forces this incredibly stark dilemma. If your primary skill is producing high-quality, fluid 2D video, you are choosing to enter a competition you are mathematically guaranteed to lose.
But it's not just about speed, is it? There's a qualitative trap, too.
A huge one. Because AI operates by calculating the statistical average of its massive training data, the output, while it might be technically perfect, it inherently risks standardization.
Everything starts to look the same.
Everything starts to converge toward a predictable, optimal, but aesthetically homogenized expression. It's the mean. It's the average of everything that's come before.
It's the visual equivalent of elevator music. It's technically perfect. All the notes are there, but it is completely devoid of a signature or surprise or any kind of soul.
That's a perfect analogy. And that oversupply of standardized digital content is what collapses the value.
It has to.
It absolutely does. When flawless digital content becomes instantly reproducible and abundant, it immediately becomes a commodity. This is what they call in finance the red ocean.
A market saturated with bloody competition.
Exactly. It's a market just saturated with identical, indistinguishable products, and it forces competition purely on price and speed until the profit margin completely disappears.
So the value proposition for the human animator, the justification for their time and their unique vision, it evaporates inside that digital box.
It's gone. You simply cannot build a career on high-definition elevator music.
So if this digital red ocean is where we're fighting machines on their own terms, we have to look outside for a survival strategy. And this is where the business world, of all places, offers a really powerful and kind of paradoxical counter strategy. Our sources call it humankind.
Right, humankind. It's this recognition that while automation, speed, efficiency, all that stuff is now table stakes.
Meaning you have to use it just to keep up.
You have to, but they are no longer the primary differentiators for value. The market today is experiencing this profound automation fatigue.
Oh, we've all felt that. I mean, you've interacted with customer service bots that are technically proficient, but are completely useless when you need any kind of context or empathy.
Exactly. That lack of personalized context, that inability to handle ambiguity, it just leads to massive frustration. Our sources highlight some really compelling data here.
What did they find?
They found that 73% of customers surveyed express a strong preference for human interaction, especially when they're faced with complex decisions that require nuance or synthesis or, emotional intelligence.
So when the stakes are high, you abandon the machine and you look for a human connection.
You do. That's the demand side. But then you look at the supply side. Is there a tangible financial benefit to being high touch in an age in automation?
That's the real question.
And the answer is yes. There's a massive financial incentive. Companies that strategically invest in integrating these high-touch, human-centric experiences. So where automation handles the routine stuff, but skilled human engagement manages the bespoke or the complex interactions.
Right.
They see profit margins that are 23% higher than their low-touch competitors.
23%? That's not a small number.
It's huge. This isn't charity. This is the market placing a premium, a scarcity value on authenticity and on embodied presence.
So if you're an animator and you translate this, it means moving away from generating content that can be endlessly replicated on a screen and moving toward designing unique experiences that require physical presence and human complexity.
That is the strategic pivot. The human touch is the differentiator. Animators have to move to spaces where the human presence, the interaction that is inherently variable and unique, the physical performance, the shared spatial experience, creates a market moat.
You're fundamentally rejecting the competition on speed and smoothness.
Completely. Instead, you maintain and you actually increase value by delivering authentic, high-touch, human-centric experiences that only flesh and blood can deliver.
Okay, so to make this transition, we first have to fundamentally redefine what animation even is. We have to strip away that century-long technological constraint. And the story we opened with, the ancient scroll, that's our blueprint for defining animation before there were ever pixels.
It's the perfect starting point. When you look past cinema, the essence of animation is revealed as something much more fundamental. It's the perception of time through the relationships between still images.
So it's cognitive, it's interactive, it's not automatic.
Exactly. And to really understand this, we have to look to the long, sophisticated history of East Asian visual culture, particularly the Chinese painting tradition.
Why Chinese painting specifically? What makes its approach to representation so unique compared to, say, early Renaissance painting in the West?
Well, it's the entire philosophy behind the brushstroke. Chinese painting is one of the world's two oldest traditions of representational painting, and it places this immense, almost spiritual value on what scholars call deixes.
Deixes, what is that?
Deixes refers to the physical traces of the artist's action, the palpable evidence of their physical effort and their movement, the mark they left.
That is a massive contrast to the Western tradition, which historically thought to erase the artist's hand, right? To create a perfect illusion of reality.
Precisely. In the Western tradition, especially after the Renaissance, the goal was often this kind of technical perfection, to create an image that mimicked a window onto reality. You wanted to minimize the visible brushwork.
Hide the process.
Hide the process. In contrast, Chinese painting demands that the traces of the artist's brushwork, the physical rhythm and labor involved, be preserved. These aren't seen as flaws, they're the heart of the vitality of the piece.
So when a modern viewer unrolls an ancient scroll, they're not just looking at the scene that's depicted, a mountain or a river or whatever. They're also, at the same time, contemplating the creative act itself.
That is the core insight. The viewer engages with two subjects simultaneously: the visible scene, the landscape, and the physical production subject.
The artist's hand.
The traces of the artist's hand moving over the surface in what feels like real time, the presence of the painter's body, their tempo, their effort is crucial to the work's perceived life.
And this concept of vitality, it's actually codified in their foundational aesthetic principles, isn't it?
It is. You have to understand Keiyin Shengtong. It's the first and most important of the 6 principles of Chinese painting, established way back in the 5th century.
And it translates to something like breath, resonance, life, motion.
That's a good translation. Breath, resonance, life, motion. Mastery is defined by capturing the resonant spirit of things, that indefinable quality that suggests the painting has its own energy or breath, extending beyond just a mere physical depiction.
Okay, so if I'm a modern spatial animator, how does understanding breath resonance help me escape that AI standardization trap? I mean, it sounds intensely philosophical.
It's intensely practical. Think about it. AI generates statistically perfect results, which are smooth, yes, but they lack deixes. They lack the evidence of intentional human struggle or rhythmic effort.
The breath.
The breath. Hewen Shentong teaches us that value lies not in flawless smoothness, but in conveying a unique, vibrant signature. So for a modern spatial animator, this means intentionally designing installations or experiences that incorporate a human signature.
Like what? What would that look like?
It could be a slight intentional imperfection in the timing of a light show, or a subtle variation in light that mimics a hand-drawn line, or maybe a rhythmic movement in a kinetic sculpture that evokes a body's natural breath. It turns what would be a flaw in a digital render into a valuable artistic choice.
And the hand scroll format itself it's like the earliest interactive animation device, because the viewer is the machine.
The format is ingenious. When you open the scroll, your left hand is slowly revealing the unseen narrative sections, while your right hand is winding up the parts you've already looked at.
So you're physically pulling the story into view.
Exactly. This physical embodied movement, the rolling and unrolling, is what generates the sense of traveling both in space and in time. The viewer moves freely, controlling the speed and the direction of the narrative flow. The control of time is in your body, not in the fixed frame rate of a projector.
This brings us to the conceptual weapon against AI standardization that you mentioned, heterochronic juxtaposition.
It's an incredibly powerful narrative device.
It's a bit of a mouthful. What does it mean?
It just means placing multiple scenes that occur at distinctly different times or different actions by the same figure, side by side within the same visual field. We see this brilliantly executed in those 12th century East Asian picture scrolls, most famously in the Chujigiga, the wrestling frogs and rabbits you described, and the Shigisan Enji.
So it's not like a modern comic strip, which is a continuous scene. This is a deliberate visual jump cut.
It's a jump cut. The mechanism leverages the viewer's cognitive effort. The physical act of you unrolling the scroll functions as the playback device. And by intentionally juxtaposing, say, the moment of two figures grappling right next to the image of one of those figures being thrown,
A jump in time.
a visual jump in time, the physical movement of your eye and your hand across that space forces your brain to actively bridge that narrative gap. The illusion of motion is created in your mind, not in a series of flawless frames.
But doesn't that risk breaking the narrative? I mean, why is this cognitive disruption valued over the flawless, perfectly timed flow that AI can deliver so easily?
Because that disruption creates engagement and scarcity. AI excels at linear progression. It can predict and generate frame B flawlessly after frame A. But heterochrony forces the human viewer to perform the creative leap.
You have to do the work.
You have to interpret the transition, you have to supply the implied time and energy between the two scenes. This is a cognitive strategy that machines right now struggle to replicate authentically because it relies on a very human understanding of narrative ambiguity and inference.
And this is perfectly demonstrated by the work of that contemporary Kyoto artist, May.
Yes, May's work is a fantastic modern example. She recognized that AI art was achieving this kind of standardized beauty, smoothness, perfection, perfect timing, but it was losing its soul.
It had no DXs.
No DXs. So she returned to the principles of the Imaki scrolls and created these modern installations that use this exact technique. You can imagine a massive long mural or maybe a digital projection surface where a bird is shown hatching, flying, and nesting all at the same time within one extended visual space.
So the genius is that the people walking by are physically editing the story with their bodies.
They are. Their pace, their gaze, their decision to stop or speed up, all of that dictates their experience of time.
Who become the directors of their own experience.
Exactly. She isn't delivering a prepackaged video file. She's providing the components of a story, and it's the viewer's body that provides the necessary temporal glue to hold it together.
And that's the profound implication for AI.
It is. When the content requires variable, physical, non-linear interaction to be activated, the machine's efficiency at linear generation becomes irrelevant. The future lies in forcing the human body and brain to bridge the gap, to move differently than the algorithms predict.
And this spatial conversion of time isn't just an East Asian thing, right? We see similar mechanisms all over the world when sequential art couldn't rely on film.
Oh, absolutely. The conversion of physical length into temporal length is a universal pattern in sequential art that requires physical intervention.
Like Trajan's column in ancient Rome.
Perfect example. Its continuous spiral relief requires you, the viewer, to physically walk around and look up, converting vertical and rotational space into narrative time.
Or the Bayeux Tapestry in medieval Europe.
Same principle exactly. These are all early forms of sequential art that control time by controlling the viewer's movement through space.
But within the scroll tradition, there's an even more radical technique we found in the research. The intentionally scrambled narrative scrolls.
Yes, like the Jataka of the Deer King Ruru.
If the goal is didactic storytelling, why would you intentionally confuse the viewer? It seems so counterintuitive.
It's a fascinating pedagogical tool, and it highlights a high-level creative strategy that directly counters the predictability of AI. In these literary narrative scrolls, which typically had monoscenic compositions alongside text, the sequence of pictorial events could be intentionally scrambled.
Mixed up on purpose.
On purpose, even if the viewer already knew the traditional chronological story.
That seems counterproductive. Why make the viewer work harder?
Because the work is the internalization. If you, the viewer, are already familiar with the traditional chronology, the scrambled pictures force you to pause, recall, and mentally replace the events into the correct chronological order of the story.
It prevents passive consumption.
Completely. The scrambling wasn't arbitrary. It was designed to make the story resist easy explanation. By being confused for a moment, you are forced to actively walk the chronological path of the narrative in your mind, connecting the dots yourself.
So the goal isn't just to tell the story, it's to solidify its place in your memory through cognitive effort.
Exactly. This internalization through physical and cognitive effort, this high-touch, human-centric demand for engagement, is exactly the kind of process that maintains value outside the commoditized digital sphere. It resists the smooth, predictable output of generative AI and offers a unique, deep engagement that screen media really struggles to achieve.
Okay, so if the blue ocean is defined by physical space and embodied time, the critical question for an animator listening to this is, how do I take my 2D skills and port them to this new three-dimensional domain?
The foundational realization is recognizing the limits of the machine. AI excels, as we've said, at manipulating pixels on a 2D plane. But it has fundamental real-world limitations in designing and generating three-dimensional space, and crucially, flesh and blood bodily experiences within that space.
And that's the moat. That's what the animator has to build.
Moat.
But hold on, we've seen incredible 3D rendering from AI. So why can't it just design successful physical installation or exhibition?
It can render the visuals perfectly, it can show you what it would look like, but it cannot replicate the authenticity that's guaranteed by a human-created physical experience.
The bodily resonance.
That bodily resonance we talked about earlier. When humans engage with art, we seek that unconscious simulation of the creator's physical traces, that feeling that a human being sweated or struggled or moved to create this piece.
The Deixes.
The Deixes. AI-generated works, because they lack this physical production subject, they are often perceived by viewers as aesthetically flawless but fundamentally hollow or empty. The lack of a human touch leads to a lack of a soul.
So the scarcity value isn't just that it's physical, but that it feels authentic and high touch.
Absolutely. Just think about the market dynamics. Digital screen content is infinitely reproducible, which drives prices down to zero. Conversely, time expressions constructed by humans using physical space. They mobilize all of the viewer's senses, sight, sound, proprioception, movement, creating a unique, non-replicable experience.
Which creates scarcity value.
It's pure scarcity value. Market analysis consistently shows that physical spatial experiences, like a specific live concert or a unique museum installation, they maintain a high price positioning because they deliver experiential value. Digital content, on the other hand, is commoditized.
So the core value proposition for the animator moving forward is to shift from being a content creator to being an experience architect.
Exactly. This strategic shift is recognizing that the animator's core skill set is not creating video frames. It is directing time and space.
That's a powerful reframing.
Animators spend their entire careers mastering the control of a viewer's gaze, emotional pacing, narrative timing, visual composition. This is a powerful, highly portable skill set that extends far beyond the edges of a monitor.
Okay, let's look at the direct application of those skills. If I'm a storyboard artist, how does my knowledge of 2D gaze guidance help me design a physical space?
It's a literal translation from 2 dimensions to 3. Designing the visitor flow paths in an exhibition space is simply the physical extension of the gaze guidance principles you find in storyboards.
So you're leading their body, not just their eye.
You're choreographing their body and their attention. An animator who understands where the viewer's eyes should land, how long they should linger on an emotional beat, and what visual transition should precede the next major narrative reveal. They are uniquely qualified to map a physical journey through a gallery.
And what about the manipulation of mood? The color scripts and lighting cues that drive an animated film's emotional arc that must translate directly into spatial design too.
It does. Spatial direction through lighting changes, color design, shadow manipulation. It's just the three-dimensional application of cinematography. Animators understand how a color shift can signal dread or relief or a change in time of day.
So they can become spatial cinematographers.
That's the term. Applying that knowledge to physical installations, using programmed LEDs or environmental light shifts, turns them into directors of the mood of a room, not just a frame.
This brings us to that veteran animator you mentioned in the research, Haruki, who made this exact career pivot. How did he take his 2D skill and apply it to a physical installation?
Haruki's story is a perfect case study. He was a veteran animator in Tokyo, dedicated 2 decades of his life to perfecting 2D in-betweening.
The really painstaking process of creating the fluid movements between keyframes.
Painstaking. And he watched generative AI automate that process in seconds. But instead of fighting the machine, he pivoted. He decided to become a director of space-time.
So what did his installation look like? How did he replace the fixed frame rate of the screen with something physical?
He created this dynamic, multi-sensory gallery installation. Instead of projecting a finished film, he used thousands of programmed LED lights that he configured as brushes, and they illuminated this massive textural surface.
And the key was that these lights were not set to a loop.
Not at all. They were set to react to the visitor's presence and their physical movement.
So the visitor's pace actually dictated the timing of the light changes and how the visual sequence emerged.
Precisely. If you walked slowly, the LED brushes might execute a slow, deliberate drawing sequence, revealing the narrative gradually, just like the slow unrolling of a scroll.
And if you moved quickly?
If you moved quickly, the lights would flash and blur, creating a sense of rapid, almost chaotic motion. The visitor's body completed the circuit. It transformed their movement from passive consumption into active direction.
That's incredible.
Haruki had successfully leveraged his timing and compositional expertise to manipulate time in the physical air around the audience, creating a non-replicable, high-touch experience.
That's really the essence of the skill transfer, isn't it? Recognizing that the ability to articulate movement and time is exponentially more valuable when you apply it to the three-dimensional, embodied reality that AI can't touch.
Exactly.
So physical installations are one route out of the screen, but the next, and maybe the most potent frontier, involves using the animator's skill set to merge physical space with digital overlays. We're talking about the realm of immersive design.
Immersive design represents a major technological leap beyond just 2D screens. It's the use of virtual, augmented, and mixed reality VR, AR, MR, to fully absorb users, to create the illusion of physical interaction with a realistic digital atmosphere.
And this design philosophy is being appropriated for, well, everything, complex world building, narrative media.
Yeah, it's benefiting areas as diverse as mental health, gaming, education. It's a huge field.
Within that field, the specific concept of immersive mixed reality street play, or IMRSP, almost like the ultimate embodiment of our scroll-based philosophy.
IMRSP is the future of co-located bodily play in public spaces. It utilizes these see-through mixed reality head-mounted displays, or MRHMDs, that overlay digital elements onto the real world.
And crucially, the main mode of interaction shifts entirely to body movements. No screen tapping, no controller input.
That's the key difference. This is the vision we've seen teased in speculative videos for years. Collaborative, dynamic, Harry Potter-style wizard duels spontaneously breaking out on city streets.
It sounds like the perfect rejection of the isolated VR experience. It's pushing technology toward a shared, collaborative physical space.
It is. Traditional VR so often isolates the user. IMRSP forces the experience to be co-located and shared, leveraging the physical environment and the social context. I mean, early location-based AR games like Pokemon Go were successful,
Sure,
but they were still fundamentally mobile games that relied heavily on screen interaction. IMRSP moves the animation from the screen to the body itself.
So the research on this topic used a fascinating design probe called MOFA. What did the multiplayer omnipresent fighting arena teach us about designing these complex interactions in these dynamic real-world environments?
MOFA was created specifically as a research-through design probe to study IMRSP in the wild. They had to test the tech and the social dynamics across a bunch of different contexts.
Like where?
Everywhere from urban parks, which they called S3, to public building atriums like Grand Central Terminal, S4, and even busy city streets in Soho, Manhattan.
So how did they manage to design the interaction to be intuitive and, more importantly, safe, considering players are moving and performing these gestures in public?
Well, they focused the entire gameplay around a magic theme, centered on spellcasting gestures using a physical wand prop.
A physical prop?
Yes, and this design choice was genius in several ways. The wand provided intuitive affordance. You don't need instructions to know you should wave a wand to cast a spell, especially in a context that aligns with, stereotypical wizardry.
It's visceral.
Exactly. The physicality of the prop made the interaction visceral, giving haptic and visual feedback that a virtual button press just couldn't. But most importantly for safety, the mechanics centered on movement-based ranged attacks, these virtual magical energy balls, which avoided any need for physical contact between players.
That's smart. It dramatically improves safety in these unpredictable urban settings.
It does. And this emphasis on movement-based tactile interaction perfectly mirrors that shift we were seeing earlier with the kinetic sculptures in urban environments.
Right, in Tokyo and Seoul.
Yes. In cities like Tokyo and Seoul, you have these collectives that are increasingly installing kinetic sculptures in public spaces that respond physically to environmental stimuli, to humidity, to wind, to the vibration of the subway passing underneath.
They're literally turning the urban environment into an animated body.
That's exactly what they're doing. They're choosing to deliver a powerful tactile experience over another piece of high-definition automated video.
And that choice just highlights the broader cultural saturation we all feel. We're sensory deprived despite this constant visual overload.
We are. The future of animation, as these movements demonstrate, is about reversing that trend, shifting the focus from a passive, look at what the machine can flawlessly render, to an active, look at what this makes my body feel.
So, returning to the MOFA trials, when players had the HMDs on and were dueling, how strong was the blending of the physical and digital realities?
The immersion was reported as exceptionally strong. Players said they felt genuinely transported into a magical fantasy world that was overlaid seamlessly onto their reality. The quotes they collected were so powerful. One was, "I have been waiting for this duel all my life."
Wow.
It just captures that sense of fulfilled fantasy. The bodily movement and the physical prop made the augmented world feel tangible.
What's particularly fascinating is how the physical environment was incorporated into the game, even if the software didn't explicitly register those objects as barriers.
This was a key finding. It showed a true cognitive blending. The real environment intrinsically acted as the digital game terrain. For instance, in duel scenarios inside public buildings, players would instinctively use real physical objects, pillars, tables, benches for cover,
even though a virtual spell could pass right through them.
Even though the game design did not integrate real-time environment detection to impede the virtual attacks, a virtual magical ball could technically pass straight through a real pillar, but players treated the pillar as a solid shield.
They were automatically applying real-world physics and common sense to the virtual challenge.
Exactly. It demonstrates that they were experiencing the reality and the augmentation as a single, unified, blended space.
That's the animator skill transfer in action, designing an experience so compelling that the audience provides their own spatial physics.
Yes.
The vision is compelling, but the moment you introduce dramatic embodied play like waving wands or dodging spells into shared public spaces, you're guaranteed to encounter social friction. How did the MOFA study capture that tension?
That friction proved to be the most crucial area of study. IMRSP actively transforms urban spaces into these temporary, performative arenas for playful encounters. The researchers documented two critical social phenomena.
The first being the honeypot effect.
Yes, the honeypot effect was consistent across all scenarios. The initial players performing these conspicuous, dramatic gestures naturally attracted onlookers. But crucially, the participants knew they were being watched, and they embraced showmanship.
Yeah, so they played to the crowd.
They exaggerated their movements, their leaps, their reactions, specifically to entertain and involve the bystanders. The streets transformed into these lively, spontaneous, socially engaging theaters. The audience became part of the performance loop.
So for the on-site participants and observers, the immediate reaction was positive and engaging.
Overwhelmingly positive. On-site participants described the experience as highly engaging, immersive, and socially rewarding. They emphasized the joy of playing alongside friends and, really importantly, maintaining awareness of their physical surroundings.
Which would mitigate that sense of isolation you get from a traditional VR headset.
Exactly. You're not cut off from the world, you're playing in the world.
But the narrative changed completely once the experience was stripped of its context and viewed remotely online.
The acceptance gap was dramatic, and it revealed the main challenge for IMRSP adoption. Remote online observers who just watched video recordings of the gameplay, they expressed significant skepticism and, frankly, outright hostility.
The comments were pretty harsh.
They were intensely personal. Commenters called the players a nuisance to everyone and complete idiots for performing these actions in public.
So the observers couldn't see the fun. They could only see the awkwardness.
That's it. The criticism focused heavily on the aesthetics of the technology, calling the MR-HMD devices a heavy, awkward thing strapped to someone's face, and the conspicuous nature of the mirror gestures when you view them without that immersive context.
It highlights that the perception of social awkwardness and impropriety is heavily filtered by whether you're sharing the physical space and the narrative context.
It's all about context.
This suggests that if animators are going to become these directors of spatial time in public, they need to think about social etiquette as a fundamental design constraint.
Absolutely. Social acceptance is profoundly influenced by context and location. The study found that people perceived open spaces like urban parks as far more suitable for this type of play. They just saw it as exercise or recreation.
But busy spaces were a different story.
Crowded, busy spaces like narrow sidewalks or public building lobbies were deemed inappropriate.
So future designs have to incorporate this contextual awareness.
They must. Designers need to create systems with flexible interaction thresholds. systems that allow users to modulate their performative engagement based on environmental factors like pedestrian density.
So if the street is crowded, the game encourages more subtle, contained movements.
Right. Instead of large leaps and exaggerated gestures, maybe it's smaller wrist flicks or more subtle body leans.
Finally, let's address safety. If players are moving dramatically in the real world with overlaid digital views, safety is absolutely paramount. What were the specific design recommendations to ensure public safety and awareness?
The primary recommendation focuses on maintaining absolute transparency of the real world. The MR interface has to retain a largely unobstructed, transparent view. Augmented overlays need to be minimal, strategically placed, and designed to avoid cognitive overload.
You can't have people losing their sense of reality.
No, that's crucial to mitigating collision risks with real-world obstacles or people.
And how should the animation or the game mechanics itself limit dangerous movement?
The mechanics have to actively limit inherently dangerous movements, especially things that encourage sprinting or physical contact. MOFA excelled here by using that ranged attack system, the Magic Shield system. It provided clear targets and dramatic virtual feedback without ever requiring players to physically touch or collide.
And the visual feedback, it needs to be managed carefully so players aren't distracted by an augmented UI, by a health bar or something.
Correct. Designers should use environmental visual feedback. Things like detailed shield-breaking animations or scorch marks on the real ground. These substitute for traditional UI elements that float in front of your face.
It keeps the player engaged with the environment.
It does. It keeps them from looking at a distracting digital interface, and it ensures they maintain full awareness of the physical, unaugmented reality around them. The ultimate goal is to program the experience to allow for the freedom and joy of physical performance while strictly adhering to the safety and social etiquette of the real world.
That is a phenomenal journey. I mean, taking us from the profound simplicity of 12th century ink drawings all the way to the immersive complexity of future urban play.
And the central insight, it remains consistent across 8 centuries. Animation, in its truest form, as represented by that East Asian hand scroll, was an inherently interactive, embodied art form. It was dependent on the human body and physical space.
The viewer's movement was the original playback engine.
It was, and the artist's physical trace, the Deixes, was the essence of the work's vitality.
So the overwhelming inevitable success of AI in generating smooth, flawless 2D video. It's not the death knell for the animator. It's a necessary evolutionary pressure.
It is. It forces a return to that original embodied source of value. The future involves recognizing the animator's core skill not as a pixel technician, but as a director of spatial time.
By strategically shifting their domain to physical installations and immersive co-located experiences.
By applying heterochronic juxtaposition in 3D, creators are generating scarcity and authenticity in a world that automation fundamentally cannot touch. The animator's greatest asset is the ability to command time through physical space and human presence.
So the conversation today really moves us beyond the fixed passive screen. It tells us that the most valuable creative endeavor for the animator lies in reclaiming the human body and the unpredictable, beautiful chaos of real three-dimensional space, ensuring that the magic is not just rendered, but truly performed.